Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Today, let's talk a little bit about shukr. So shukr, and you can't really talk about shukr without sabr, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says in numerous places, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ, right? And there's all sorts of talks of sabr and shukr. Sayyidina Umar Faruq radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, لَوْ كَانَ الصَّبْرُ وَالشُّكْرُ بَعِيرَيْنِ لَمْ أُبَالِ أَيَّهْمَا رَكَبْتُ. Which means that if sabr and shukr were two different camels, I wouldn't care which one of them I rode. In a modern example, you can say something like, if sabr and shukr were two different vehicles, if they were two different cars, I wouldn't care which one of them I drove. That means that sabr and shukr are part of two different, actually you can say they're actually two sides of the same coin. Right? Sabr and shukr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed ups and downs in your life specifically so that you realize different aspects of His mercy, different aspects of His jalal, different aspects of His jamal. And those things are not fully realized without things like sabr and shukr. Sayyidina Ali Murtaza radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that sabr is that kind of vehicle that never breaks down. He said it's that kind of steed that never falters. So you can understand it in the first sense, that type of vehicle that never breaks down, that never jerks, it's something that's always smooth. So that lends the question then, what is the sabr? Sabr is not simply just passing the time when things are bad. Sabr is the way in which you pass that time. If some calamity or any kind of bad time befalls you, the question is not that the time passed. The question is, what did you do with that time? In what manner did you spend that time? Did you spend that time complaining? There are lots of people who, if they go through something bad, they will complain over and over and over again. And when they're advised to have patience, they're like, well, we are having patience. That's not necessarily patience. If you're having a calamity and there's nothing you can do about it except kick and scream, then you're not having patience with that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَالصَّبْرُ الْجَمِيلُ, quoting from Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam in Surah Yusuf. Sabr is beautiful, right? Sabr is better. Sabr is the best thing. That means that when you have sabr, you spend those moments in the best way possible. That's the best way to sum up what sabr is. As for shukr, shukr is something that arguably we can say, especially for young people, that is probably the more important aspect to focus on these days. Right? We live in times that are full of economic abundance, even though we can say that if even in economic downturns, we still live better than people in previous times lived. We have access to facilities that nobody before us ever had access to. We have access to technology. We have access to clean water. We have access to comfortable beds, all sorts of things, especially in this society. So shukr is something that's extremely important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. Most people, they're not thankful. Most slaves, most servants. We are all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's slaves and servants. We're not thankful of what we have. What is shukr? Shukr is not necessarily looking at the blessing that you have. Shukr is looking at the one who gave you that blessing. That means that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a car, shukr is not looking at the car. Shukr is looking at the one who gave you the car, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shukr is looking towards the things that you get and not necessarily indulging in those things for bad purposes. Because if you have a car, you shouldn't use it to go towards places that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't want you to go to. If you have clothes, you shouldn't use it for purposes that would entail disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have eyes, you should not use them to look to things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded you not to look at. There's an interesting saying about shukr of the eyes and shukr of the ears. Shukr of the eyes is when you see a fault in another person, that you cover the fault of that person. And shukr of the ears is that if you hear of the faults of another person, then you cover those faults also. Which means what? That you draw a veil over the faults of other people. This is one of the forms of shukr. To hide the mistakes of other people. This is something upon which society is founded, especially Muslim society. You can say that all of the four Khulafa Rashidun, especially Sayyidina Ali and Murtaza radiallahu anhu, their khilafah, their reign as khalifas, was defined by this practice, was defined by this principle, to hide the faults of others and have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change those people for the better. That's something that we've totally forgotten about in our time. Hiding the faults of others, not spreading the things that we hear about other people. This has become so commonplace, spreading the faults of others, talking about other people unnecessarily. And we play games with ourselves and make ourselves think that this is necessary, when in fact it's not. Shukr is an end to this. Shukr is bringing these things to a close. Shukr is to stop playing games with yourselves. Shukr is to really be honest with yourself about the activities that you're doing. Are you doing them to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or are you doing them to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And shukr is finally to hope that other people will find a better path, and not necessarily to disclose things about them, and to make dua for them. And this, inshallah, is what leads to brotherhood. When you've realized sabr and shukr, you've realized an aspect of brotherhood. And when you've realized an aspect of brotherhood, you've realized an aspect of servanthood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we call ubudiyya in Arabic. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq of this ubudiyya. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq of true sabr and shukr. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us true brothers and sisters towards one another. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.